Thank you for the opportunity to present the GESIS panel today. And the service we developed, the GESIS panel, addresses an everlasting headache we all have when developing a research proposal in the social sciences. And what I mean is the question, how can I collect representative data which can be generalized to a target group, to a population, for my own research project, and of course, ideally free of charge. As you might know, there are a number of offers in the US, such as test experiments for experimental surveys, and there's also the LIS panel in the Netherlands. But up to the year 2013, there was no such offer for Germany. And what we did, we set up an open access panel for the social sciences, which we call the GESIS panel. When we started to develop the GESIS panel in 2013, we had 4 deliverables in mind. The first deliverable was to provide free data collection services for the social sciences within the mixed mode access panel. And in the GESIS panel, we combine an offline mode with an online mode. Offline means we are collecting data for a part of our panelists using mailed surveys. And for the other part of our panelists, we are collecting data using web-based surveys. And the idea was to have a probability-based panel which somehow maps the German population between 18 and 70 years of age. The second deliverable we had in mind when we started with the project was providing free access to the data collected within the GESIS panel. So meaning you might be interested to field a study, you might be interested to use the data, or a combination of both. So you might want to use GESIS panel data, and on top of that also field your own items, and then address your research question with a combination of these 2 different approaches. A third deliverable was to enable knowledge transfer on how to build and operate similar panels which are similar to the GESIS panel. There are a number of initiatives out there in Europe, and we help colleagues to build these panels, but this is not an issue for today. And another deliverable is also to generate knowledge on access panel data quality, but this is also not the topic of my today's talk. And with each and every deliverable, there's a different target group associated or affiliated. Of course, we have panelists, and last year, in June, we started with a recruitment process, which was finalized in December 2013. I will briefly talk about the recruitment process. We have also primary researchers, meaning you as a target group, interested in fielding their own survey studies within the GESIS panel. Data users, academic panel providers are another target group, and of course survey methodologists who are interested in our methodological findings. But my today's brief talk, about half an hour, is on what we have prepared for primary researchers, and also the ways to use the data, the access points for using GESIS panel data. And GESIS panel data have already been published a few months ago. Let me give you a very brief overview with a couple of important issues regarding the GESIS panel. As I already told you, the GESIS panel is a probability-based access panel of individuals, not of households. The LIS panel is a household panel. Our population are individuals. In Germany, German-speaking between the age of 18 and 70. And you see, as Ineke said before, we are somehow restricted. Our panelists are from registers, population registers in Germany. We started with 270 sampling points and conducted last year, between June 2013 and December, about 7,600 face-to-face interviews. So no telephone interviews, but personal interviews in the households. Our estimate was that we would be able to start with about of 2014, but we ended up with about almost 5,000 panelists. So our starting sample was 4,960 panelists at the beginning of 2014, and our first wave in 2014 was fielded in February. The GESIS panel is a mixed mode panel. About 65% of our panelists are participating via a web-based interface, via the internet, and about 35% of our panelists participate in the GESIS panel by sending back mail surveys. Invitation in the GESIS panel is always done by mail. So we are sending invitation letters, and also for the online panelists, and we're using prepaid incentives just to reduce non-response, of course, because we know from a couple of meta-analysis that prepaid incentives is one of the most efficient methods and procedures to reduce non-response. So the initial contact for at the beginning of each and every panel wave is always a mailed invitation with €5 enclosed. And for the online panelists, we are also sending a few days later a mail invitation. We can also host experiments, but currently we are, because of our offline mode, somehow restricted. Not any type of experiments, experiments with 4 groups maximum. Perhaps in the future we will extend to a broader set of experiments, but currently 2x2 experiments can be fielded pretty easily in the panel. And every data collection wave encompasses about 20 minutes of interviewing time. And on the next slide, I will briefly show you what kind of studies we can host within the GESIS panel. And here on this visual, you see a timeline. Every 2 months we have a data collection wave going on, and each and every data collection wave encompasses about 20 minutes of interviewing time. And well, we are a panel, but you are not required to submit a longitudinal research question type of study. So it is okay for us if you submit a cross-sectional study. 5 minutes in wave number 1, study 1 in wave number 1, or 5 minutes in wave number 2, study number 4 in wave number 2, that's pretty okay. That's the first type of study we can host, purely cross-sectional research question. The second type is a multiple cross-sectional study. So study number 2 in wave number 1, study number 2 in wave number 3, study number 2 in wave number K, that's also pretty okay for us. So, and the third design, of course, is the classical longitudinal design, and illustrated here by a connection between these 2 data collection points, study number 3 in wave number 2 and study number 3 in wave number 3 with a connection, so you might be interested in inter-individual change. And the difference between the multiple cross-sectional design and the longitudinal design is simply that you have to reckon with a different type of sample, or a size, a different sample size. In multiple cross-sectional studies, a refreshment would be pretty okay for most researchers. For longitudinal research, attrition, of course. And here's a summary of the different study designs we can host: the single wave design, the cross-sectional design, the multiple cross-sectional design, and the panel design. But what we are not willing to consider here, a group between 8 and 48 years, this would be unfortunately not accepted, because we would like you to take advantage of the entire sample, meaning the sample between 18 and 70 years old. A second thing is also each and every researcher can apply for up to 5 minutes of interviewing time per wave. So that's the maximum. You can, of course, submit a research proposal with just one research question, one survey question or 2 survey questions, but the limit within each and every wave is 5 minutes. Of course, you can apply for multiple waves, but to be fair also to other colleagues, you cannot block the entire data collection wave. And the third important information is that we also have study modules we develop by ourselves. We call them the GESIS Panel longitudinal course modules. I will tell you more about the core study modules in a minute. And these are topics which are of a broad interest. For instance, on human personality, on political activities and attitudes, and so on. So within each and every wave, 5 minutes are reserved for the so-called longitudinal course study. And if you're familiar with the LIST panel, in the LIST panel you have a similar concept that the LIST panel also collects data on their own course studies. But the data is freely available, of course. Okay, and now I'm briefly summarizing how to submit a proposal to the GESIS panel and what we developed for primary researchers. And the model we use is similar to the model when you submit a paper to an academic journal. When you submit a paper, then you are preparing the manuscript according to the style guide of the respective journal, and then you are visiting the homepage of the journal, uploading your manuscript, and you get status there, and you see when your manuscript went to the reviewers and whether you have feedback, and the editorial decision is also communicated to you via that platform. And the same logic applies also for the GESIS panel. So we call it a self-service environment for submitting proposals to the GESIS panel, and you'll find it also from our start URL. So the URL here is a bit too lengthy. On this site, the GESIS panel proposals submission site, you find also instructions on how to prepare a proposal, on how to prepare your survey. What we accept is an electronic survey only, and the electronic survey then matches how we are going to collect the data online. So then the next thing is also we provide you with documents how these surveys should look like, because please bear in mind we have an offline mode, so the survey has to match the style guide for the offline mode and also for the online mode. And all these documents can be found here. And when you're ready, meaning when you have prepared your proposal, and the proposal consists of a structured abstracts, a survey, an electronic survey, and a codebook, then you can easily submit your proposal for fielding a study in the GESIS panel via this site. And on the next few slides, I will briefly show you how this proposal should look like. We provide you with templates, of course, where you can simply write in brief abstracts, the questions you would like us to field, the background of the research, the dissemination strategy, and so on. We also provide you with an environment to develop your electronic questionnaire. So if you're familiar with the program UniPark, you can start right away by using our template. But if you do not have access to this program to develop electronic surveys, we will give you to develop your electronic survey. And the Excel codebook can also be easily downloaded from this survey development environment. Okay, here you'll find a brief summary of the different slots to be addressed within the proposal you might want to submit, besides descriptives about the principal investigators, the overall problem statement, express the research question you pursue and the hypothesis, if you have any. Then the research design, whether it's a cross-sectional design, a multiple cross-sectional design, a longitudinal design, the instruments you use and where they are from, whether you take them, for instance, from the Albus, from the EL, and so on. The planned analysis, the expected conclusions and implications, and the dissemination strategy. And this proposal will then be directed to reviewers from your specific areas. So not we are going to assess the quality of your proposal. Reviewers, much like in an academic journal, will tell us whether we should host this study. And another important information, because you're disclosing a lot of details about your research, this won't be published. What we are going to publish is a brief study description. And the brief study description, in most cases, encompasses about half of a page, a brief summary, and is focused on the constructs and the variables you are assessing, and not necessarily on each and every detail of your research. So you do not need to be. The next thing I wanted to briefly show you are the topics of our longitudinal core study. On the right side, you can see a summary of the topics in the Dutch LIS panel. The Dutch LIS panel has a slightly different scope. They have also a whole bunch of studies on health and on epidemiology and so on. We are more towards the social sciences in the broadest field. And one of the core study modules is subjective well-being. Karina Corness is actually here, one of the co-authors of this core study module. And this has been fielded and will be fielded each year in February. The next is political and social issues. Then we have environmental attitudes and behavior. We have a module on personality and personal values. Information and communication technology usage, and we are combining this module with an update of the demographic variables. Angela Tanner is also one of the co-authors. She's also here. She developed module number 5 with other colleagues, of course. And we have a work and leisure module and a small module on evaluating the entire experience. As I said before, these variables are going to be assessed each and every year at the same time, and are also being published with our data set. And you can, of course, combine your own research with these background variables. If you would like to dig into details in one of these specific areas, you are free to do so. So if you are an expert, for instance, in the area of personal values, and you would like to ask more questions which are value related, you're of course free to do so. So we're not telling you that you should stick only to the variables which are already in our data set. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show you briefly is how to access the data. How to retrieve the data or use the data, because we have various data sets and not each and every data set can be easily downloaded for obvious reasons. We're using an infrastructure here in the GESIS archive, which is called the DBK, in German Datenbestandskatalog. And in this environment, we have 2 versions of the GESIS panel data set. The first version is, we call it a full version, meaning this is a data set which encompasses almost everything we had collected except the open-ended responses. And this can be used here locally for obvious reasons, because they're identifying individuals. So you cannot download this data set. You are required to use it in this secure data center environment, which is provided here locally at GESIS in Cologne. And the second version is a version where we feel pretty comfortable about data protection, meaning identification of individuals is, we think, almost impossible. And this data set can be downloaded. You have to sign a contract. You have to outline your data protection concept, but then you can download this data set. And these data sets are also called incremental master data sets because they grow every second month. Every time we collect new data, we attach the new data to the previous data sets, and we also implement a number of corrections, of course, if we find errors. And this can be then found every second month in the updated GESIS panel data set. Another feature of this environment is also that these data sets can easily be cited because you get these DOI numbers. And this is also a requirement when using GESIS panel data, that you are citing or you're expected to cite the data set you are using. And the third feature is that we provide you with all the details to make sense of the data. For instance, we publish here in this environment so-called study descriptions. So you find the descriptions of each and every study collected within the GESIS panel with a short abstract, with a description of the concepts, descriptions of the variables, and the theoretical background. We also publish here a code book that you can easily understand what is in the data set, including also paradata. In the online stream, we have paradata. In the offline stream, we have paradata and so on. And these documents also grow incrementally every second month. Okay, and after a while, our data sets get larger and larger, and it may be not easy to analyze, and that's why we are using a similar or almost the identical technology the LIST panel uses for publishing data, the Cuesta system, which is currently under development, also here in Cologne at WTS. And using Cuesta, you can generate customized data sets. This will be available most likely in 2015, but using this tool, you can select your variables, you can select your concepts, and let the system generate customized data sets. But this is something for the future. As I told before, Cuesta cannot be cited. We think this is a huge disadvantage, but every time you generate a data set using Cuesta, you get the corresponding DOI number referring to the DBK. So also data generated with Cuesta can be easily cited. Okay, this was my core talk. You can find more details about the project at www.gesis.org. And I'm happy to answer all the questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for this brief and crunchy introduction to the GESIS panel. And I bet you must have raised some interest here amongst young people who think like, wow, that's a great resource for now collecting data on an issue and research questions that I would really like to research, but I've always lacked the infrastructure for that. So does anybody have a question to Michael right now?
I'm sorry if that's a bit of a technical question, but if you invite people to join your panel, how do you decide who gets to be an online and offline panelist? So how did you arrive at the 35%?
Yeah. It has been decided by the potential panelists by themselves. So at the beginning of the recruitment interview, we asked for internet access, whether they have access to the internet, a private household. And during the KP interview, the interviewer then offered the online mode first. And if the potential panelists declined to participate online, then the offline mode was offered. And if we knew, or if the interviewer knew, the interviewer program knew, that someone didn't have internet access, then the offline mode was offered. And I didn't stress it, but it is an important observation that we have 65% of online panelists, despite the fact that in Germany we have an internet penetration rate of 80%. Meaning we have 15 percentage points of people, despite having online access, preferring the offline mode. And that's an important information. This also confirms our initial decision to offer an offline mode and not to offer technology. Yeah?
Okay, did this respond to your question? Right, great, thank you. Further questions? Questions from online? Sorry.
So if you collect data through your panel, is there any embargo period? So do you make the data available straight away? Or?
We wanted to impose an embargo of 6 months, but then we were kind of confined by a monitoring body of GESIS. So we immediately published the data as we have processed them. And this can take about 2 to 3 months. after having fielded each and every wave. So it's a pretty fast process. No embargo. That's the message.
More questions?
Well, just following up on the first question, because we are methodologists here. It looked in the section 6 of the questionnaire, there was the survey mode update or something like that. So I guess I took away that respondents can change their mode of participation. Is that right?
It is possible from offline to online, but not vice versa. So we offered at the beginning the possibility to change from the offline mode to the online mode because the online mode is much more convenient for us. It's much cheaper, of course.
And I presume you have an indicator in the data sets for which mode?
Yeah, of course. Everything is in the data sets. We have also different kinds of paradata for online panelists compared to offline panelists. For online panelists also the amount of time they devoted on each and every page and so on, and the different routes through the survey and so on. Everything can be there. And you can use the data right now because we are currently in the third updating cycle, and GESIS Panel data can be downloaded today after having signed a contract and the contract gets approved. Okay, that's the restriction.
So maybe something for the later practical sessions in some of the courses.
Yeah.
Other remarks and questions? I saw something in the angle of my...
I'd like to know a bit more about the proposals you got up to now. And maybe you can tell us who was it, how many did you have, how many did you not take into account, and what was maybe the criteria you used or the main problems you assessed to get a glimpse of how you accept or make your decisions and how you won't and who, because I guess it could be problematic also in the whole landscape of surveys, because we could come and say, oh, that's a cheap pretesting possibility probably. Other surveys could do that. That's something I think about. Would that be a reason not to take it? It could be a cheap pre-testing possibility for other surveys. You know, we have a nice infrastructure over there. Is it something you want or something you don't want? But also for young
no,
people.
we're not very positive about becoming a pre-testing environment. That's clear. And we already anticipated this because we are going to ask within the submission documents whether you had already a pre-test and what the results of your pre-test was. And if you're going to frame your study as a pre-test, we will most likely direct you to our pre-testing lab. We have a wonderful pre-test lab, and they could pre-test it then, and then you can come back, of course, and submit your study to the GESIS panel. Your first question was on the different kinds of studies we have accepted. They are from various fields, from political science, from psychology, from sociology, and so on. And you can find them in the study descriptions document to get an overview. Everything is very transparent. We still have open slots in the GESIS panel. So one concern among colleagues is mostly that we run out of space and we get flooded with submissions, and that's not the case. We have submissions and our acceptance rate is pretty high. We have about 90% acceptance rate right now, and this can decline in the future, of course, but there's still space, you know? Because many colleagues think this is such an attractive offer, we don't have a chance and we're not going to submit. And that's a curse for us, you know. And so the important message is now it's the right time to submit your study to the GESIS panel because we still have open slots.
Great. So start working on your proposals. I think that's the message, right?
Right.
After having a nice evening reception with us here, of course. So that's for the night shift. Further questions? Otherwise, I have a brief one as well, but
okay.
That picks up on what Corinna said in the pre-testing environment curse. No, that's another curse.
Yeah.
But that you, I guess, have found a way already. But you have mentioned the GESIS pre-testing lab, and I think that has gained a resource, right? Is there anything you want to say about that, or is that not far enough yet?
Well, and unfortunately, usually I have a couple of slides on the pre-testing lab, but I don't have them here. But the pre-testing lab at GESIS offers a broad array of different pre-testing facilities, from field pre-testing to lab pre-testing to eye movement analysis and so on. And you find it easily over with the aid of the general entry point of GESIS, with a comprehensive description of the different services of the pre-testing lab. So the pre-testing lab is not part of the GESIS panel, but we are closely collaborating with other units, also with our translation unit, of course, because you can submit studies for the GESIS panel either in German or in English. And if you submit items in English, they have to be translated. And for this, we have already anticipated a procedure how to translate these items. And as we learned before, this is not a straightforward issue. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of additional information. You know, this is not just for people in Germany working in German on topics relating to Germany. Of course, a German sample has to be able to respond to this in a sensible way, and so there's of course certain limitations, but it doesn't. Proposals don't have to come from German institutions, right?
No. Every researcher can worldwide can submit a proposal. And we are also happy to accept studies for PhD projects, of course. We're not going to check whether you're a PhD student or not. That's fine. Just commercial projects are not acceptable, of course, for obvious reasons.
Any other questions?
Thank you once again. I have a question. It's not necessarily my personal question, but I was wondering, because we have so many participants from other countries, other institutions. Are there any events planned where you will share perhaps your expertise, your experience, things that went great and things which went wrong, so which might be perhaps of interest to some of our participants and people who join us online?
Well, I can tell you my prediction was that this project and all these bad news didn't come up or show up. That's a good thing about the GESIS panel, and also our response rates are extremely high. So wave-to-wave response rate in the online stream of about 90%. So I'm talking about those having participated in the previous wave. 90% also are willing, of those being invited are willing to participate, slightly lower in the offline stream and so on. So I can talk a little bit about the challenges. And the challenge, one of the major challenges is, of course, to harmonize the offline mode and the online mode. So we had a lot of work with developing standards and style guides to make these two modes somehow similar, and we are not yet 100% certain whether we manage to find an ideal solution. Another thing is also during the recruitment process, we had minor issues that some of the regional authorities were not willing to cooperate with us, but among 270 sampling points, we had about 5 or 6, no, it was 7. It was seven sampling points, which for which we had to find another solution. But this is something which comes immediately to my mind, because the strategy in the GESIS panel was, and we were lucky because there were other projects out there, like the LIS panel. We learned a lot from the LIS panel. We learned from the German Internet panel, which is a closed panel. The German Internet panel at the University of Mannheim is not open to the public. And so we were able to somehow develop solutions to prevent these huge catastrophes to happen. And another thing we also did is we consulted, of course, past knowledge by reading a lot of systematic reviews and meta-analysis to get it somehow in control of non-response or the non-response issue. And starting from there, we developed a whole bunch of measures and procedures to increase the willingness to participate. If we have time, I can show you a couple of issues we developed in the GESIS panel. And now the topic is just on non-response issues. And I can talk also about managerial issues and so on. We started with a sampling frame encompassing 270 sampling points. And of course, here we have the problem I mentioned before, that some of the municipalities were not willing to cooperate, and we had to find an alternative for that. And our alternative was that we bought an address register, we had a random selection of households, and we had identified respondents via the last birthday method. So we didn't replace the sampling point. We stuck to the sampling point, used it, and found a solution for that. But the problem is not that large. Then fieldwork. During the fieldwork, what can happen during the fieldwork? Non-contact, of course, can happen. Then a rejection of the interview. When the interviewer attends the household, the potential panelist rejects to be interviewed. And then within the interview, it might happen that the potential panelist rejects to become a panelist. And what we did here was we had postal letters, pre-notifiers to the household, to the individuals we wanted to interview. At least 4 contacts had been used. Every time the interviewer attended the household, he or she left a contact card. We were here. We will come back. You can reschedule the appointment using 0800 number. We also used an electronic APO-compliant contact protocol to monitor the field work. This was also done. We had experienced interviewers and, of course, the usual interviewer training. What can happen within the interview? The interviewer conducts the interview, or the potential panelist rejects to participate or rejects to become a panelist. The interview was very short, pretty short, about 20 minutes. We used 2-sided incentives because this turned out to be an effective method and procedure to increase the willingness to participate and the willingness to become a panelist. 2-sided incentives means that the interviewee received €5 for taking part in the interview, and the interviewer also received an incentive if the interviewee complied to become a panelist. Then we used personalization, because when you read all these meta-analysis about what works in survey methodology, personalization is an issue. And we personalized the recruitment interview by, at the beginning or in the middle of the interview, we asked for a number of different life domains about leisure activities, family, work, and so on, and how satisfied the interviewee was with these different life domains, and how important these life domains are to the interviewee. Meaning we then, during the program, knew a lot, and then we proceeded with the topic which is most important to the interviewee and where the interviewee was most happy with. For instance, if the maximum score for the product importance, that work is most important and that the interviewee is most satisfied with his job, then the second part of the interview dealt with work-related issues. And at the end of this personalization intervention, we asked for the willingness to participate in the panel. So that was the solution. Then we offered a tailored mode. This was a question related to your question before. Tailored mode means at the beginning we knew something about private internet usage. And then when someone complied to become a panelist, we offered the online mode first if the program knew that this respective person had internet access. And if not, the offline mode was offered. And if a potential online panelist declined to participate online, then the offline mode was offered. Then after the recruitment interview, we invited the panelists to a so-called welcome survey. And the time between the recruitment interview and the welcome survey was minimized. So no more than 2 weeks after the recruitment interview had been conducted, the welcome survey was sent out. It was a prompt invitation. We used prepaid monetary incentives by mail, and we stick to that procedure. So every second month we are sending out 4,000 and something letters to the panelists with €5 enclosed. We had a reminder strategy, of course, with multiple reminders, the option to switch the mode from online to offline. We have a 24/7 hotline. This sounds more complicated than it is, but panelists can always call us ask for assistance. If our panel manager is there, she can directly help. And if not, a call center we hire the call center for that. And so on. And we stick to most of these measures and procedures during the different survey waves. So a very long response to your question. We try to anticipate most of the problems regarding non-response in this case.
Great, I think that's an extremely useful and illustrative examples of how you try to increase data quality or keep it high from the start, since you've had such a good response in the initial.
Well, we cannot make a strong claim regarding the true data quality, but in the GESIS panel everything is transparent. So you might want to download our data set and then compare our data against an available benchmark you are using, such as the Elbus or microsensors or whatever. So you can make your own informed judgment based on GESIS panel data, whether we did well, whether we introduced some special or type of biases by using personalization, by using incentives or whatever. So everything is very transparent and open in the GESIS panel.
Okay. I think there's time for further questions with some glass and a drink in hand. I hope you will not leave right away.
No.
Very good. So thank you all for participating in the discussion. Thank you for the presentation. And see you again tomorrow and, of course, for now, later as well. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, welcome.